I'm Brad Gardner, and I practice labor law at the law firm of Udall Shumway. You'll see 7 different areas of concerns that employees and their employers most frequently are concerned about when they're working from home. First off, from a personal standpoint, interruptions. This is probably the #1 concern that psychologists doing studies in this area have found are an issue. From my own experience, again, from years of doing this already, I have a wife and her and I are empty nesters. And that sounds good, but the problem is that we have a good number of animals at our home. We have 2 parrots, we have 3 dogs, 4 chickens, and a giant tortoise. Now, that creates, as you can imagine, quite a disruption on my home life occasion. And what I found is that you have to have an appropriate setup in your house which can insulate you from all those type of interruptions. The second area is lack of discipline. And I think we as professionals know how important it is to be able to discipline yourself when working. But people who are doing this for the first time sometimes get tripped up on that. They don't have the discipline that they need. And because of that, I think it's very important to frequently contact your employees who are working from home. That can be conference calls, it can be just one-on-one calls, anything to let your employees know that it's still work time. Closely associated with that is the issue concerning isolation. Psychologists have also found that that is a very common problem, particularly with people who are spending 8 to 10 hours a day behind a computer with no other interaction. Fourthly, what we see is a lot of people end up working longer hours, which may have wage and hour issues, and I'll discuss that in a moment. Also, there's a real separation of work and home life that you need to make sure you're able to accomplish. I don't know about a lot of you, but I know that honey-do list for me usually doubles up in size when I'm working out of the home. And I've had to have this conversation with my wife that there has to be a certain amount of separation when I am working from home. Another area that employers have expressed some concern over is that people who are newly working out of home and have not really done it before, sometimes there's a certain lack of professionalism in terms of the emails that are going out. That has to be stressed to all your employees. And finally, there's the relationship issues between you and your wife. And again, I think that's one of these situations where you really need to know your relationship. You need to really have a good understanding with those around you, whether it's your wife or kids or whoever. They say that you really don't know how good your relationship is until you have to work with your significant other in a work environment. That's so true. So communicate, obviously, with your spouse or other individuals in your household to make sure they understand the importance of this. And by all means, I think it's a great idea if as you implement work from home policies, that you do actually have a written policy on this, where you identify some of these issues that psychologists have seen that are very common when someone is working long hours from home. The next issue relates more to business type issues, working from home. First, tax issues. One thing that I've observed is that I have a lot of clients who, as soon as they start working out of home and having people do that, there starts to be issues concerning whether or not they can start taking tax deductions on their home and things of that sort. Be very careful on that. And if any of your employees are going down that path, guide them towards a good CPA, because being able to deduct portions of your home mortgage payments, things like that, very hard to do. You have to be very careful, or you and obviously your employee could end up in the audit. Second, overtime issues. Because the computer is there 24/7, it's very easy to go overboard with some of these, with the amount of time you're actually spending on that computer. And the Department of Labor has been very clear on this. Even if you have a policy that says you can only work 8 hours a day, if that employee can show that they have worked 10 hours a day, you're still going to have to pay them. So you should have a policy that addresses that and makes it very clear that they should only be working a certain number of hours a day without advance notice. And if that is violated, they should be and can be disciplined up to and including termination, but you'll still have to pay the overtime. Also, one other thing is important. Stay in close contact with your IT professional. There are software packages that you can get which can actually track the time that your people are working online. And that's something that may be helpful, because if you ever run into a wage and hour issue that the employee claims they work 50 hours and you think they only work 40 hours, unless you have a clear mechanical system, whether a manual system where you clock in or a system that keeps track of the time using technology, if you don't have those type of tracking devices, the courts in Arizona require the employer to meet the burden of proof. Not the employee, but the employer must actually be the one who carries the burden of proof into court. They must show with a preponderance of evidence that your employee only worked 40 hours. So in effect, in most instances where plaintiffs have the burden of proving their case as the employer, as defendant, you have the burden, if you don't have a mechanical tracking system, to actually show or prove that your employee did not work those full hours. Thirdly, workers' compensation. Very few people think of that, but you should think about that. What if I'm at home with my 2 parrots and my dogs, and they get into a fight downstairs, and I'm working upstairs, and I walk down the stairs, I slip, fall, hit my head, crack my skull open. Is that compensable or not? I'm not really going to answer all of those type questions today, but it's something you need to think about with your workers' comp carrier. Contact them and see if they have any policies or recommendations. Now, that doesn't mean you're not covered. It just means that the carrier may very well dispute some of those claims, and you want to have a really good understanding with them as far as those claims that they will or are not going to cover in that type of scenario. Also, in terms of privacy and data protection, very, very important to make sure that when your workers are working off-site, that you still want to make sure the trade secrets are protected, that confidentiality issues are addressed. The same with data protection. You want to make sure that your staff knows that simply because they're working out of their home, they still must maintain the trade secrets, confidentiality, and other information which could be deemed to be private. Once again, I think it's a great idea. If you have a written policy that addresses all of those issues, they're very easy to put together. If anyone wants to get a copy of a policy like that afterwards, please feel free to contact me. But those are the issues I think that are most commonly seen when you're dealing with employees working from home. Now, the second issue I want to cover very quickly is Governor Ducey's recent executive order concerning unemployment benefits. A few days ago, Governor Ducey issued an executive order which basically waives some of the defenses that employers previously had concerning unemployment benefits. The first is a waiver of the 1-week period between the time someone is laid off and when they can actually file for unemployment. That is no longer the case. They can file immediately. There is no longer a waiting period. Number 2, there are no job search requirements. There is a waiver now that of the previous provision, which indicates that applicants who are receiving benefits need to conduct good faith job searches to find new jobs. That requirement has now been eliminated. So if you are on board and you are able to get unemployment benefits as an employee, there is no requirement to do any type of job search, either looking for new jobs or attempting to get your old job back. One other thing that should be mentioned, and it's not on my outline, but it is important. The new guidelines for unemployment require either A, you no longer have your job, or B, you have become underemployed. And basically what that means is that where you were previously working 40 hours a week, you're now only working 5 hours a week. In other words, there's a great disparity between the number of hours you typically work and those you're actually working. In those instances, DES may determine you're underemployed, and you can also apply for unemployment benefits. Those benefits range anywhere from $200 to $240 a week and can last up to 26 weeks. One other question, I had a question from a client yesterday who basically wanted to know if they had a fully employed individual who was working at home, not doing any work, but they were just keeping them on the payroll, and that employee went ahead and filed for unemployment, and they wanted to know if they should challenge it. My answer to that is, of course, absolutely challenge it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't challenge unemployment claims if there's a challenge there. If people are getting all the money they're entitled to, even if they're doing no work, they're clearly not entitled to unemployment benefits, and if DES contacts you and asks for your opinion as far as whether or not that you're entitled to benefits, you should obviously challenge that in the normal course of business. Thirdly, cybersecurity. I want to mention this very, very quickly because we're already seeing issues with that out in the workplace now. You know, you've probably heard the saying, when there's chaos, there's opportunity, and that's the way the hackers look at this. And one of the hacks that people are seeing currently is one in which they get an email or other communication from Costco, which basically says if you pay us X number of dollars, you're going to get X number of dollars of merchandise plus $50 more. Now, it looks like a great deal. The only problem is it's a scam. It's not real. And what they're really trying to do is get access to your computer. And the best way I've had this described over the years to me by technology experts, it's kind of like being in a castle back in the days of yore, and you have this moat around your castle, and the moat is there to keep people out. And the only way they're going to get in that castle is you to lower that drawbridge. That's the whole idea behind why they're trying to get into your computer and how they're getting into the computer. If that drawbridge comes down for 30 seconds, you may have 20 bad guys get into the castle. That may not do a lot of damage, but if that drawbridge is down for half an hour to an hour, you're going to have all sorts of people getting into your castle, and that castle is your computer. And once they get into that, a lot of bad things can happen. The 7 most common hacks that we have going on out there right now. These are all very common: backdoor, denial of service, direct access hacks, eavesdropping, spoofing, tampering, and information disclosure. I'd like you to look at all of those. This is a great time to be really close and personal with your IT person, because those hacks are out there. And by the way, one other thing, the IRS is not going to contact you and say, where would you like your check, either from a business standpoint or from a personal standpoint. Please give us your bank number so we can direct deposit the check. Those hacks are obviously over the telephone, but the same principle. They're not going to give you a call like that. Anything like that is going to be phony. And if you have any questions, whether it be an app or if it's a verbal communication by a governmental agency, watch out. It's probably a scam. And if you have any questions on that, again, please feel like giving me a call.